Welcome into Overtime, presented by McDonald's. Along with Brock Netter, I'm Dewey Dailey. As we bring you into today's episode, Brock, a fun week 3 is now in the past, and we'll take a look back on it and also look a little bit ahead to the upcoming week 4 matchups and talk about some impact players as well. So it should be a fun episode. Definitely a fun week in week 3. A lot of good matchups that went down.
Yeah, a lot of great matchups. A lot of a few blowouts as well. So kind of a mixed bag of results, but that's kind of every week in high school football.
Right.
You have your close games that you pay attention to, and then you have games that you have your eye on, but deep down you're kind of like, this could get ugly. And then there's always a couple games that you're like, this guy's potential to be a really good one. Then it just goes the complete opposite direction of how you think. But that's the beauty of high school football. And week 4, it's gonna be no different for sure.
Right. So the format for today's episode is going to be a lot similar to the Tuesday episode if you tuned in for that. So Brock and I will talk about what I would typically talk about, and then we'll have John via video record.
Found the spider. It
I was
crawled on me.
Say.
It crawled on me, and it is gone. All right, we're good.
That's a callback to Tuesday. If you tuned into the Tuesday episode, the spider's been haunting us for that much time.
For 2 days, apparently.
Yeah, right, for 2 whole days. But for the football reviews, we'll take 2, and then John should be sending in some clips from the 2 he's going to review. So we'll start with Waverly at Unioto. It was our game of the week here on Overtime, the game that we live broadcasted from Unioto. So Waverly takes it 28-14. It was the 5th consecutive time that the visiting team has won that matchup. So it's been pretty evenly contested the last handful of years. On the broadcast, I mentioned the last time a team won in consecutive years was 2017 and 2018. So it's been a little while. Early on, it was a lot of Waverly. I think Waverly probably won like the first 8 or 9 meetings. I mean, they dominated for a while, and then in 2019, Unioto picked up their first win in a little while, and then since then, it's been back and forth all the way up until 2023. But for Unioto, just a quick game summary, jumped out to a 14-0 lead, and then Waverly actually scored twice in the last, I think, 2.5 minutes of the first half. Long touchdown to Cody Swartz, and then another hook and lateral from the Tigers, this time for Jay Surt, actually found his way into the end zone. I think it was 48 yards out. It was right around midfield. And then in the second half, Waverly, I should say, Mason Kelly, a touchdown pass to Mason Sparks, and then I think it was a 74-yard passing touchdown to Cody Swartz. So a 4-touchdown night for Mason Kelly, 28 unanswered points for the Tigers, and they are now 3-1 heading into week 4. Quick, accurate statistical summary: Mason Kelly, 14 of 29 for 299 yards and 4 touchdowns. Of those, Cody Swartz, 10 receptions for 211 yards.
Oh, the mic fell.
And 2 touchdowns. Oh my gosh, did the mic break?
The mic fell. I didn't even touch it. Oh, we are going off the rails, folks. Okay, we are going to figure this out.
It may have to screw back on.
Oh, joy to the world. Okay.
It may have broke, honestly. These were pretty...
Actually, I don't know. I do not know exactly what happened. This is going off the rails, folks. We did not.
There, just done. You just have to unhook the little clips.
Goodness gracious, what are we doing?
I wondered how long these would last. They were like $20.
I even said before the show, let's just hope they make it through the episode. And I don't know if I jinxed that or whatnot, but okay, we're gonna figure this out.
All right, so after the mic situation has been fixed, we'll just go back to the statistical summary. I'll just start all the way over. Mason Kelly, 14 of 29, 299 passing yards with 4 passing touchdowns. Of those, Cody Swartz, 10 receptions for 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then after a tough week 1, it's been back-to-back extremely successful weeks for Jay Surt. 32 carries for 181 yards, and also technically a 49-yard receiving touchdown. It was off the hook and lateral. Call it whatever you want. It's funny because off a hook and lateral, you get the receiving yards, but it's not a reception. which is interesting.
Well, I guess in a way that makes sense because you didn't actually get the catch.
You get the yards,
Yeah,
but no
you
catch.
you get the yards and the credit for the touchdown because you're the person who brought the ball into the end zone. But yeah, you're not the person who caught it.
And I think it was Lane Bear who. And if you watch it back, really Lane Bear didn't even catch it. It was almost just like a set, like just a little touch pass back to Hurd, but it worked.
Just like a volleyball stick
right. And really, the initial play in terms of getting a touchdown didn't exactly work, but Jace Hurd made like 4 guys miss, and 49 yards later he's in the end zone, and that tied it up, headed into the break, and that was 14 of Waverly's 28 unanswered points. But then for Unioto, they fall to 2-1, their first loss of the year. Newton Hoops, 17 of 37 for 173 yards, also had a rushing touchdown. Connor Dollison, 16 carries, 121 yards and a touchdown. And then leading receiver for Unioto was Blake Hoops with 7 catches for 58 yards. So I will say for Hoops, probably not his most accurate game he's had. I mean, he's had an outstanding start to the year, set the record for passing yards the week before against Amanda Clear Creek. So, just kind of a tough game. He overthrew a couple open receivers in the end zone. He also had a pretty tough interception. I think it was like 1st and 10 on the Tiger 15-yard line. Mm-hmm. So just an unfortunate game for him. I think if they would play, 10 times, I would say it would be like 5-5 or 6-4 somewhere. I think it would be extremely close, but overall a pretty good matchup in week 3. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything. Well, first of all, it wouldn't surprise me if both of these teams went out. I mean, for Waverly, it's a little bit tougher because you got to play Wheelersburg, and then, West, in my opinion, it's kind of been surprising on how competitive they've been. I don't want to say, because, they lost a lot with like Irwin and Sissel. I knew they would still be good because defensively they were bringing back a majority of their impact players. Mm-hmm. But, offensively, Mason Parker has done a great job stepping up for West. And, Cole Tipton at quarterback. They don't throw the ball nearly as much as they did, but it's almost just kind of like, okay, we're either going to run it with our quarterback and Tipton, or we're going to run it handing it off to Mason Parker. So I think that'll be an interesting matchup. I think those two actually play in week 5, Waverly and West. So probably a little bit tougher road for them. And, I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything like positive about Unioto without getting like crucified for it. Like, it's getting to that point.
I mean, to be fair, we do have a
I know, and
right here.
it's not like secret that I went to Unioto.
Yeah.
But like,
at least not anymore.
Like, right. And right, it's not now if it was. I mean, I think the Unioto helmet was pretty clear that either me or Bruce went there. And I like what I saw from Connor Dollison just in terms of the rushing, because I think the rushing game was a bit of a question mark for Unioto for the first couple of weeks. They didn't really have like a set guy. But from what I saw from Dollison in week 3, despite the loss, is like a pretty big reason why I don't think they'll lose another game. Mm-hmm. Because having a guy that can run for 100 yards, I mean, that opens up so much in the passing games. And like, if Hoops doesn't have probably, I would say, his most inaccurate game through the first 3, like a good chance they win that game. I mean, they were 1 interception away from taking a 21-14 lead. I can't remember if that would have tied it up at 21, but for Unioto in terms of the SVC, I would still consider them, in my opinion, the favorite. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but like,
I mean, we're already here,
right?
We're here.
I'm saying it. I don't care if I'm not allowed to, but the same can be same for them. I mean, the same can be said for them because Zane Trace is still there. They had a blockbuster matchup last year in Kenny Kinnick. Paint Valley has had really good showings in the first couple of weeks, and even Piketon has done. I know you have them, I think 7th or somewhere like that in your power rankings, or 10th, in the top 10.
Yeah,
but I think Piketon has had a really good showing.
We'll dive
into
that here in a little bit,
right? So really not an easy path for either team. I mean, that's the case most of the time.
Yeah,
but like I said, it would not surprise me if somehow both teams go undefeated the rest of the season. And then John will actually have a McClain Paint Valley, another SVC FAC matchup from week 3. He'll have the review for that. And then
week 3 was outstanding. Hopefully week 4 will carry on with more of the same. For my first game review here live from Houston, Texas, McClain at Paint Valley in the battle a state route 41. I thought it was 28, but I think I read 41. I mean, I know that those roads are real close to each other. So I'm going to say 41 since that's what I read. But the battle went to the Bearcats, 29-15, but was not easy. They had to make some big-time stops defensively, deep in their own territory. It was also a come-from-behind game as McClain got out to a 7-0 start as Drake Stapleton scampered 12 yards for a touchdown. And also, it's a dynamic team that McClain has with Stapleton and Penwell and Potts. I mean, it's a really tough offense to stop if you are not prepared for all the different ways they can attack you. But Paint Valley answered with a 58-yard touchdown pass from Preston Faber to Bryson Dunham, the senior, undersized senior. If you see Bryson Dunham, you may not think a whole lot because he's very undersized, but dude can fly. He's hard-nosed, can really make some big plays for the Bearcats, and he did with that first half score. Paint Valley was able to get a late stop after turning it over. Penwell had an interception, and Paint Valley was able to get a stop to end the half. Going into halftime, 7-7, and to start the second half, Paint Valley got the ball, and they decided they were going to run some clock. They're going to run the ball, and they put together a long, punishing drive, and they scored a 2-yard touchdown from Braylon Robertson. Just went right at McClain, right down the middle, ran the ball really well. They then forced a turnover deep in their own territory, which led them to extend their lead as Faber went 53 yards to the house to take a 21-7 lead. McClain got back into the game with a wild play, which they threw an interception in their end zone, into the Paint Valley end zone. Paint Valley went to return the interception and was actually stripped of the ball. So, Ohio State fans think Maurice Claret with Shaun Taylor in the national championship game stripped the ball. Cade Sponsel stripped the ball and returned it to the end zone for the score. They got the 2-point conversion and made it 21-15. But after the teams traded stops, Paint Valley was able to go on another long touchdown drive, capped off with a 2-yard touchdown plunge from Faber. His third score he had a part of on the night, second running, for a 29-15 win. McClain will face off some more neighbors, this time on the other side, which is a little bit outside of our area, with the Astros of East Clinton coming into play. East Clinton 2-1, coming from Sabina to Tigerville, because I think Tigertown might be sponsored by you guys over there at McGillicuddy Studios this week. But, it's an improved East Clinton team, so McClain's got to play well, but it's definitely a winnable game for them. Paint Valley will start SVC play as they will host Southeastern, another team who is much improved. Been playing a lot of young guys the last couple of years. It seems like it's, kind of coming a little bit more together for the Panthers. So that should be one to watch. Both teams at home in week 4.
Also, dive in here for a moment into the Wheelersburg and Jackson game. Brock, I know you were in attendance for that game, one of the bigger games of week 3. How did that one play out down at Jackson?
It played out pretty much, I think, the way that most people thought it would play out. It was just a slugfest all around. All the way down to the final possession. Jackson, they go up 14-0 really quick. Cade Wolford made just one of the most incredible plays I have seen, literally just mossing a defender, breaking a tackle, going 61 yards. So Jackson appeared that they had the game well in hand. It was about 4 minutes left until halftime. They had the ball. They had the ball 1st and 10 on their 20, and then they made a high snap. They made a high snap, and the ball went from the 20 down to the 1. They recover drive-ins and a short punt, and drive-ins and a short punt. Wheelersburg scores. Wheelersburg, they get the ball back. They get the ball back again, and then they throw an 18-yard touchdown. Braylon Rucker finds Kenyon Evans in the back of the end zone, and all of a sudden it went from 14-0 with like 4 minutes left to 14-14 at halftime.
A lot similar to the Unioto.
Exactly. And I mean, momentum just completely switched, and you knew from that point, okay, this is going to come down to the final possession, and I mean that's what happened. Wheelersburg, they opened the second half, scoring a touchdown, but had the point after blocked, and in a game like that where the margins are so close, that block PAT, right. it proves to be a difference maker. Unioto would know that having a block PAT against Benton County is how they won. So Jackson, they answer right back. Wolford goes 72 yards, and then they force Wheelersburg to punt. Jackson gets the ball back, chews up some clock, gets a rushing touchdown. Wheelersburg, they have one more shot. They get all the way down to the Jackson 28, I believe. They decide to go for the touchdown. I think it was like a 3rd and 18 after a sack or something like that. And the pass is intercepted. Jackson wins 20-20. Just another instant classic in the rivalry that Wheelersburg and Jackson have developed over the past 5-10 years or something like that. It was the first time that a senior class for Jackson had gone undefeated against Wheelersburg in their high school career.
So they beat them 4 straight?
They beat them 3 straight. So the COVID year for the seniors would have been their freshman year. So they didn't play, but they go 3-0 against Wheelersburg in their high school careers. First Jackson class to ever do so. So it was a huge win for Jackson, especially from a bounce back factor, having
lost to Ironton.
Coming off that loss to Ironton where they just got where they were just out physical, they were just out toughed. And I mean, coming back against a Wheelersburg team that pushed Ironton literally to the brink, and you pull out a win in that type of fashion. A great win for that Ironman program.
And I will say, I think the matchups between those 3 teams, being Ironton, Wheelersburg, and Jackson, are like typically always like maybe not all match of or game of the year candidates, but like they always deliver.
Yes.
Right? Like you're always going to get worth the price, or you're going to get worth the price of admission. One thing, because I know you were at both games, and I don't know how much detail you could put it in, but what did you see from Jackson? Because like going into the game, I can't remember if John and I did picks or not, but if we would have, I probably would have taken Wheelersburg just because they had a common opponent in Ironton. Wheelersburg played them a lot closer than Jackson did. So, what did you see from Jackson against Wheelersburg that maybe you didn't see against them or against Ironton for them?
I think the biggest thing is that,
and it was at home instead of
I mean, in a way you could say not being on your home turf matters, but also at the same point, I think the biggest thing is that it was the first time I think in probably the last 7 years that I can think of that Jackson looked outclassed against Ironton. It was close for 3 quarters, but you could just see that Ironton was just way more physical. They wanted it more. They had a little bit more electricity. Yes, the game was at Ironton, but also at the same point, 2 years ago when the game was at Ironton, Jackson was up 10-7 with 1.3 seconds left.
Oh, that was the kickoff lateral game. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that.
That was the kickoff lateral game. So it was the first game that Jackson, they just looked outclassed. It just came down to that. And I mean, I understand that, Jackson, they're breaking in, a ton of new players. They're breaking in 18 new starters.
Right. You have Bodie Wolford at quarterback.
So it was a real quick lesson that you have to grow up incredibly fast when you reach varsity football. And the biggest thing is that when I talked to Jackson coach Andy Hall after the loss to Ironton, the one thing he said to me, he said, I'm going to challenge these guys this week. I don't care how young they are. I'm going to challenge them. And either one of two things are going to happen. Either you are going to quit or you're going to grow up.
Right.
And I mean, they were challenged throughout the entire week, and even more importantly than that, it wasn't that they were just challenged in practice; they faced other challenges as well, because 6 of their starters didn't even practice all week.
Oh, really?
They had the flu going around.
Seems like it's been going around everywhere.
Yeah, it's been going around everywhere.
Even like up at school at Ohio State, we've had some classes getting canceled and just a lot of. So hopefully, we're not crawling back.
Yeah. Hopefully, we're not taking those backward steps. Going back. Revisiting.
Well, even
2020.
like the Reds have had like 5 pitchers go on the COVID list: Hunter Green, Ben Lively, Fernando Cruz. I mean, they've had a couple guys go on the COVID list, so hopefully we're not. Jumping back that way.
Jackson was just challenged. They were just challenged, and if it felt like it was make or break for their season right now there, even though there's still 7 games left in the season, and potentially playoffs. It just felt like it is do or die, and I mean they rose to the occasion.
So one other game review that we'll have is Logan Elm and Miami Trace. John will have that one.
Next up is a game that I think we thought was going to be a little tighter. Logan Elm at Miami Trace. I believe I picked Miami Trace on the show last week, but then I picked Logan Elm on my SOSA picks, so that worked out for me. It's kind of tough to talk about this because a lot of this review is going to be coming from our friend Brad Morris's game story from the Sporting Pumpkin. It's very detailed, outstanding, just like anything that Brad wrote was. When I was coaching, he was the first person I did an interview with after the game, and I couldn't tell if he was like taking notes on what I was even saying, but the next day it was word for word in the Circleville Herald of what I had said, and actually went more detailed on the game than I actually expected. So a huge pillar in our community, that's going to be a major loss for everyone in Pickaway County and the people that were fortunate enough to know him. You should definitely go out of your way. He has a couple of stories from Friday night. One was this game, and another one was from the Westfall and Circleville game. So definitely go to the Sporting Pumpkin, support them any way you can, and just make sure you remember Brad for how great of a writer he was, and just how genuinely nice and caring of a person he was as well. But going to the game, it started off with Miami Trace's Julian Baker scored from 2 yards out. Landon Thompson answered with a touchdown for Logan Elm. Dalton Guest scored with an 8-yard pass. Both extra points were failed by Miami Trace, so it was a 12-7 game at this point, and then after that it was all Braves. Landon Thompson scored again. Miami Trace put together a pretty good drive, and they got inside the 10, but they were stopped on 4th and goal as Ian Rose came up with a big-time play at the 2-yard line in a one-on-one situation to get the ball back late in the half. 1:44 left in the half, so you go in the 2-minute offense, and the Braves rolled off 98 yards in only 7 plays, capped off with a 25-yard touchdown pass from Aaron Summers to Camden Red, and that was really the capper on the game. That was it for Miami Trace's battle, but it was all Logan Elm from Rose's stop onto until that score until the fourth quarter. The drive only took 1:17 off the clock, so they still had to play a little defense in the half too. So 1:44, they went 1:17, 98 yards. Really impressive drive there in the 2-minute offense. After Thompson made several big runs in the third quarter, the Braves were able to use a little bit of misdirection as Walters faked a. It was actually touchdown pass was Aaron Walters to Camden Red also. So Walters was able to fake to Thompson before rolling out on a bootleg to score from just under 10 yards out. Extended the lead even more in the fourth quarter with Thompson scoring again. And then Walters connected with Red a second time for another score. To cap the evening off, Julian Baker scored on a 75-yard kickoff return for Miami Trace to make it a 41-20 final for the Braves. They improved to 3-0. Thompson ran for 142 yards and 3 scores on the day, while Walters was 20 of 29 for 275 yards and 2 touchdowns, both to Camden Red. So just a really good showing from the Braves as they continue to make a lot of noise in Southeast Ohio. They're 3-0. They host Circleville in a big rivalry game this week. And then, they're just going to keep rolling. I think they've got some good matchups before they got Bloom Carroll, I believe, in week 6 or 7. They are a team that has really, really impressed a lot of us. And, it's a outstanding job so far. And this is something that actually Brad Morris had said was they had a great chance if they could beat Zane Trace to get off to a really good start. Until that Bloom Carroll game, and they have done so. So for Miami Trace, they will actually host the Bethel Tate Bearcats. Hold on. It may not be Bearcats. I thought it was, but originally I thought it was Bees. So let me check real quick. Bethel Tate Tigers. I like the B name. I'd go Bearcats on that. So the Bethel Tate Tigers, who come in at 1-2, will actually host Miami Trace in week 4. So that's a big game for Miami Trace. 2 straight losses. They need to get back into the good graces as they get ready to. They got a couple big road games before league play starts in week 6 for them.
One thing I do want to say about Logan Elm is they have my attention now. I mean, after the first couple of weeks, you pick up a win over Zane Trace. And then I think they played Westfall week 2, which I think they whacked them 42-3. I think everybody kind of expected them to beat Westfall.
It took a while for them to find their bearings against Westfall. It took a little bit.
Was it not 42-3?
I mean, it was like 42-3 or 41-6 or something.
I know
like
it was
that.
they covered the spread, to say the least.
It was kind of close for a while. I think at one point it was 20-6. I think it was third quarter. Mm-hmm. So I remember seeing the score and I'm like,
what's going on?
Westfall still got a chance here.
Offensively, Westfall really isn't awful.
No, they're not.
The Wickline kid's really good.
Yeah.
I can't name any off the top of my head, but I think they have a couple good pass catchers as well. So offensively, Westfall's not somebody you can sleep on.
Exactly.
But I will say, Logan Elm, after this win over Miami Trace, who has now dropped 2 straight games after taking down Waverly in week 1, they definitely have my attention now. I am now watching them, and I think them and Bloom Carroll are a lot closer than I thought they were 3 weeks ago in the preseason.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
Because ultimately, I think Bloom Carroll in the MSL is the team with the target on their back.
Yeah.
I think it's been that way for probably a number of years now.
Probably the last 7 years, maybe. Maybe even further back than that.
Right. So I think that's a week 7 matchup between those two. That's one I definitely have circled on my calendar, and would not surprise me if we have that game live that week.
Oh, yeah. Both teams for sure will be undefeated heading into that matchup. These Logan Elm Braves are for real. Aaron Walters is the real deal under center. He's got 3 targets led by Camden Reed, big 6'5" tight end that you can just throw the ball to at any time. This Braves team, they're loaded offensively. They can get stops defensively. They have the experience from last year. And I mean, they want it. They are hungry this year. So I definitely expect that they will be undefeated heading into that Bloom Carroll matchup. Will they be undefeated after that? Remains to be seen. But I can for sure see them being, whether it's 6-0 or 7-0, heading into that matchup.
I know Logan Elm. We've mentioned Backyard Brawl Week this week against Circleville, and then I don't know exactly who Miami Trace plays, but they still have 2 non-league games before. I think they're the only team that they don't start league play until week 6.
Yeah,
because there's only 6 teams in the
6 teams
FAC.
So,
but given the current landscape of college football, would not surprise me to see some more teams in the FAC or in the coming years, as conferences have all just about evaporated in college football, and it wouldn't surprise me if that doesn't trickle down to Southern Ohio and the in the surrounding conferences like the SOC, MSL.
I've heard some rumblings, but nothing concrete so far.
Right, and that would probably take a little bit of a development.
Oh, for sure it would.
I mean, that's not like something you just urgently do. Like it takes probably a couple years to do. But once again, John Bruce will have the in-depth review of that game. I think it was like 41-20. It was a pretty dominant win for Logan.
Yeah.
And then we'll go over some impact players from the previous week. One we've already touched on a little bit is Mason Kelly, right? After a week 1 loss, 2 straight wins for the Tigers over pretty respectable programs. You take down Zane Trace on the road in week 2, and then another SVC school on the road in week 3. You take down Unioto. So back-to-back really good wins heading into league play. But for Mason Kelly, in week 2, they didn't throw the ball around that much, only 8 pass attempts. But week 1 and week 3, more or less 2 300-yard passing games, technically 299 the previous week, but I mean, I think we can just round that up to 300. And then through 3 games, he has 8 passing touchdowns. We already mentioned how last week he had 299 for 4 touchdowns. So, I think the step that Mason Kelly has taken from last year to this year is a big reason that, and even the steps, although he didn't have a bad game week 1, he threw for like 361 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think the steps that he's taken from last year, even like over the summer into this season, is a big reason why this Waverly team is impressed the last couple of weeks, and a big reason why I think they have a good chance to go undefeated the rest of the season. So, Mason Kelly, one of our impact players. I know John will have, I believe, Shaun Terry of Ironton, and then he'll have Bryce Wickline of Westfall, who we mentioned a little bit ago when talking about them, and Logan L.
One of the biggest impact players of not only week 3, but so far in all 3 weeks of the season is Ironton's Shaun Terry. On Friday, in their just dismantling of Fairland, 62-14, in a game we thought was going to be a little bit more competitive, closer. Ironton was having none of that. Terry, 3 catches, 129 yards, and 3 scores, including a absurd 53-yard catch and run where it looked like he broke about 62 tackles and just got all the way down the sideline. It almost felt like, in a way, a Devin Hester punt return looked, where he was going side to side to try to decide what the best method of beating these guys was, and then he found it and found that seam and just went racing to the end zone. A super dynamic player. He's averaging 185 all-purpose yards per game, doing it in the return game, which I would think you wouldn't kick to him. It appears that Fairland did not in that game, but he can run. He's their leader in rushing on the season, like 65 yards a game, receiving. He scored 7 touchdowns on only 14 offensive touches on the season. So keep in mind, just think about what I said. He averages 75 yards receiving a game, 65 yards rushing a game, and has only had 14 total touches on the season. Like, he's not even really getting the ball. He's just breaking big play after big play after big play. And he is dynamic. He is fast. On the basketball court, he averaged 16 points a game last season. It's just, for Coach Pendleton and his staff, they're finding ways to get Terry the ball. And it's not like they can find a bunch of different ways to do it, because he's scoring whenever he does get it. So Shaun Terry is just a player you got to watch. The clip is out there on, I believe, Ricky Shifko. At Ricky Shifko, I believe, is the Twitter account that I saw the play on. And it's just an absurd catch and run by Terry on it. It felt like he went way more than 53 yards on it. It's just an outstanding overall play. Great player. He's going to make some college very, very happy. So, impact player Shaun Terry, Ironton.
But one more from our side. We actually have 2 more. Owen Ruff of Fairfield Union. 42-3 win over Warren. In that game, Ruff, 19 attempts, 201 yards, 4 touchdowns, an 86-yard kick return for a touchdown. And did I mention he's also their kicker and went 7 for 7 on PATs? I mean,
Are you kidding me?
He returned a kick for 86 yards and then kicked the PAT.
Oh my gosh!
Like, I don't know.
He's their kicker, their kick returner, and their running back.
And he probably plays. I didn't look defensively if he plays anywhere, but as a running back, probably linebacker or something. I don't know if it gets any more. We've had some versatile performances. We've talked about Connor Lentz blocking kicks, returning kicks, catching touchdowns, rushing for touchdowns, but 201 yards, 4 touchdowns, a 86-yard kick return, and 7 for 7 on PATs. That's about as versatile as it gets.
I hope he puts his feet in some Epsom salt after that. Because my gosh, man. And then the only thing that would top it is if you told me he played soccer also. Right. And I'd say, okay,
right. He had a hat trick on Thursday.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he had a double hat trick on Saturday. But for Fairfield Union, a couple big matchups coming up for them. In Week 4, they take on Hamilton Township. That's on the road. And then Week 5, they actually host Logan Elm. So it'll be interesting to see how Ruff performs against a Brave defense that's been pretty stout so far throughout the season. And then John will give his final impact player. It should be Bryce Wickline.
Another impact player, Bryce Wickline of Westfall, the senior quarterback. He didn't do as much running on Friday in their 48-36 win over Circleville. He did score from 2 yards out, but was 26 of 40 for 416 yards and 4 scores. And like I said, another rushing touchdown. So 5 scores accounted for. He connected with Bryden Gall and Trent Walters each for 2 scores. Walters led them with 11 catches, 154 yards. Also, their offense is just, it could be really dynamic at times. And that's what really, to me, stands out most about Logan Elm is they were able to virtually shut that offense down completely and hold them to only 6 points. So with, the Mustangs, they're starting to come along a little bit more. They're a little more experienced this year with Wickline, with, Gall, Walters, Jaden Toller. And then you got Joey Wright in the backfield. He ran for 200 yards in Week 1 and ran for 108 and 2 scores as the Mustangs, roll over the Tigers in Pickaway County matchup. It's an offense that's super dynamic. They got Unioto this week. I can see that game being really high scoring. Unioto's defense seems to be playing pretty decent at the time. They've got a couple of banged up players. If they can get them back, I think they may be able to control the offense. But if they don't get those players back for Week 4, then look for Bryce Wickline in the Mustangs to be able to pass the ball around a good bit and make a lot of different plays against that Unioto defense. And that should be a big time game to watch. We're not going to talk about it in our previews, but definitely is a game to watch for in Week 4.
And then our last impact player will be Cade Wolford. If you want to talk a little bit about his impact, I don't know if you have exact statistics from the Wheelersburg game, but just kind of give a little insight on what he did this past week and really what he's done over the past 4 years for Jackson.
I mean, he has been, to put it simply, he has been that guy for Jackson. I mean, even more so this year. Just coming into the year, he was their leading rusher from last year. He was also their leading receiver from last year as well.
Me, right?
Exactly,
a PPR machine.
Exactly. I mean, he is lightning in a bottle. Anytime the ball's in his hands, there's always a chance that he is going to find that end zone. He's going to find open space. He's going to make a big play happen. And I mean, it was no different. Friday against Wheelersburg. Going for 199 total yards. I believe it was like 123 rushing, and then and then whatever the math would be. I think like 76 rushing or something like that, 76 receiving or something like that. Three total touchdowns.
Does he play? Does he play defense?
He
as
does.
well?
He plays corner as well, and he had a huge pass breakup as well.
Man,
I mean, he does a lot for that Jackson offense. I think the more impressive thing is that he didn't practice all week.
Oh, he was one of the 6?
He was one of the 6 that didn't practice all week. And matter of fact, Andy Hall told me that he called Cade Friday afternoon. It was like 3:30 and said, "Hey,"
they probably weren't going to school.
and said, "Hey, are you going to be able to go tonight?" And I guess Cade told him, "I'm going to try," because he hadn't left bed. Right. He hadn't been out of his bed at all. He said, "I'm going to try." And I mean, to have the game that just come fresh out of bed, flu game, everything. I talked to him after the game. He's coughing up a storm. he just sounded winded. But I mean,
that like even like a common cold. I mean, that takes a toll on just your stamina.
Exactly.
I mean, and I remember Coach Metzler always told me, like, you can condition as much as you want, but like if you take, I think it was either 2 or 3 days off, that like resets your body. So not only just not doing much for 4 days, but being sick along with it. I mean, that's tough.
Completely out of routine. Like, you're not going to practice. You hadn't really been in school as well, so you're not up early having that routine. You're just laying in bed, just
suffering.
Oh my God, am I going to make it to Friday
from one of the biggest games of the year? It's not like it was just some
like arguably your biggest game of the year. And you're just questioning. I don't even know if I can get out of bed. And he tried. He gutted it out, and then had probably the best game of his Jackson career.
Right.
Like, that's ridiculous to think about.
So that wraps up our impact players. We have a couple game previews for this week. John will take Portsmouth at Rock Hill. I'll throw that in before we finish up with our game of the week here.
For my game preview here for week 4, we've got Portsmouth at Rock Hill. A big matchup in the OVC. You've got Rock Hill coming in at 2-1. Portsmouth coming off a heartbreaking loss to Greenup County in overtime the other day. Portsmouth was very impressive in week 1 when we saw them 59-29 win over Valley. They used a bunch of different guys to run the ball and create a lot of havoc. I thought Williams did a really good job running the show at the quarterback position, especially for a freshman. And, they came through in week 2, went to West, lost 31-14, a game they were winning at the half. And then Greenup County, is a bigger school. They lose in overtime. It's a tough matchup for them. But Highland, can really run the ball. I think against Rock Hill, it's going to be a game that could be wide open. Rock Hill does have a shutout with a 28-0 win over Sims Valley. They beat Oak Hill 47-13 in week 3, but they did lose 17-7 to Minford in week 1. So for Rock Hill, Coach Mark Lutz kind of up in the air on what the Redmen are on the season, because they've beaten a couple not very good teams. But they've taken care of business when they have played those not very good teams. So it's a big matchup in the OVC. I think neither of these teams are going to be in the running to knock off Ironton on the season. But for teams wanting to rebuild their programs to get back to the pride that their programs have felt throughout the years, is a big matchup for them. Going on the road for Portsmouth is going to be tough, but I really like their two-headed monster in the backfield. I think they can do some different things. I'm going to take the Trojans in a, not so much a shootout, but I'm going to say 24-20. They're going to get a win over Rock Hill. That is my prediction. And then we'll see how wrong I am when we talk here coming up for week 5.
On SOSA overtime, as the Eastern Eagles are going to make the trip down to Portsmouth to take on Notre Dame. Now, Eastern, obviously, out of the TBT, we're talking Eastern
Yeah, the Reedsville Eastern.
There's a lot of
Eagles,
Eastern.
yeah.
I know there's Sodaville East and then Eastern Beaver, Eastern Reedsville.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Easterns in our coverage area. So this is the green Reedsville Eastern Eagles. Both teams coming in at 3-0. For Eastern, it was a 34-8 win over a fellow SOC1 member in South Gallia. I only had stats for the first 2 weeks for Eastern. On the ground, they kind of have a two-headed backfield right now. Riley Barrett, 246 yards. He's averaging 11.2 yards per carry, has 5 touchdowns. And once again, this is through the first 2 weeks. And then Gavin Smith, 176 yards, averaging 10.4 yards per carry and a touchdown. So they have 2 guys averaging over 10 yards a carry. And then they don't throw the ball a whole lot. Cooper Barnett, 3 of 5 for 65 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I can't remember the name, but they also had somebody else who was 1 of 1 for like 60 yards and a touchdown. So I would assume that was some sort of like trick play that resulted in a long touchdown for them. And then Notre Dame, 3-0 coming in to the game, a 46-17 win at Fisher Catholic in Week 3. You know, in terms of like Southern Ohio, you know, feels on Friday. I don't know if it gets. I've never been to Spartan Stadium, so I can't say. Hopefully, I'll have a little bit better insight after this Friday. But I mean, it's a stadium. I mean, the Portsmouth Spartans, the former Detroit Lions, formerly played there. I think it was from like 1928 to 35. It was like 7 or 8 years, I believe.
Something along those lines.
The stadium is 95 years old.
Yeah,
I mean,
still standing, still
right.
going.
And for the fact, like, no matter the condition, for it to still be like in usable and playable condition. I mean, that's incredible. Now, I have played at Branch Rickey.
Okay.
Which,
I've done that
not
too.
the exact same. It's kind of like the baseball version of that in a way. I mean, it's kind of like a stadium. Yeah, I'd say it's probably the coolest place I've played in, besides maybe like playing down at Athens for like the district tournament.
The blue brick wall in the outfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of nostalgic a little bit.
But I will say for Notre Dame, through the first 3 weeks, a 152 to 35 point differential. That's insane.
You're winning games by 42 points.
Week 1, they beat Manchester. I think it was 78-0, and last week they won 46-17. I mean, that's incredible.
Gracious.
But
wow.
Nonetheless, it'll be a battle of the unbeatens in Week 4, and should be a pretty good matchup down at Spartan Municipal Stadium.
You're gonna have a lot of fun in Spartan Stadium. I remember covering it was Notre Dame versus Green. It was 2 or 3 years ago. But just walking in, I mean, and you look around, you're like, you kind of feel the history. I mean, you look at just, you know, how old the bleachers are, how old the stadium is, and the fact that it's still put together. Right. Like, man, this is kind of cool. This is really, really something to be here. So you see just the big Spartan Stadium, you know, lined up on the outside, and you're like, wow. Like an NFL team used to play here.
Right.
Like it's a special. It is a special feel. So I believe you guys are going to live stream that game.
Yes.
So you're going to be in there in the booth and everything. It is something to behold. It really is.
Well, definitely a big piece in not only Portsmouth history, not only Ohio history, but just like NFL history as well.
No doubt.
All right, so we'll look now at some power rankings going into Week 4. I know we'll have John send in his, and then I know you have yours every week on SOSAOhio.com. But for my power rankings, and then you can give yours, and then we'll stick in John's at the end.
You got it.
In the one slot, I have Ironton. You know, I think for the most part, that could probably be a mainstay in that spot for the whole year. You know, once they get into OVC play, you know, if they dropped a game to like a Gallia, Fairland, you know, Chesapeake, any of those schools, I think it could possibly drop them down. But like losing a game like this weekend to like Cabell Midland, I'm not sure if that would really warrant dropping them over teams like Jackson and Wheelersburg, who they already have head-to-head wins over. So I would say unless they drop an OVC game or even like a 2-loss or drop 2 games over the next few weeks, I think Ironton probably stay in the 1. And then the 2 slot, I have Jackson. You know, a big win over Wheelersburg this past week. You know, you have the loss to Ironton, so not going to jump them. The only other school I have them above that is still undefeated, Jackson obviously not, but Logan Elm in my 3. You know, we've talked about it a little bit. You know, they have my attention now, right? A week 1 win over Zane Trace. They take down Westfall in week 2. They're 2-0, 2 impressive wins. I'm like, okay, I don't want to say they're my opinion on them didn't change much through those 2 weeks than it had from the beginning of the year. Now, a 41 or 42, whatever it was, to 20 win over Miami Trace, who I had Miami Trace at like 6 in my top 10. So it's like, okay, like I'm watching now. Like I've got you guys on my radar. I've got them in the 3, just below Jackson. And then in the 4, Wheelersburg. I think they were in my 2 last week, or 2 or 3, so they dropped down 1 or 2 with the loss to Jackson. Not like it was a blowout, it was a tough loss.
Yeah.
Wheelersburg still probably, I don't want to say heavy favorites, but probably favorites in the SOC 2 to win the league. And then in the 5 slot now I have Gallia, who wasn't even ranked in my top 10 last week. I will say, I don't want to, like, they were not in my top 10 because I just didn't even it wasn't like I didn't have them out of my top 10 because I didn't think they deserved it. I just completely forgot about Gallia. I forget about a lot of the OVC teams a lot. I had Portsmouth at like 11 or something last week. So if I would have remembered Gallia, I'd say they probably would have been like 6 or 7 last week. But nonetheless, they're in there now. 42-12 over Point Pleasant this past week. They're 3-0. The OVC is pretty tough. You're going to have to play a team like Portsmouth. You're going to have to play Fairland. You're going to have to play Ironton. Those are 3 big games for them. But as for now, the second-ranked OVC team in my top 10. Now in the 6, we have Waverly. They've jumped up a couple spots. Since dropping the week 1 game to Miami Trace, who is no longer in my top 10 after dropping consecutive games. 2 big wins over 2 pretty strong SVC schools, most recently 28-14 over Unioto, and then it was 42-28 the week before against Zane Trace, something like that. It was a convincing win. It was a 2 or 3 score win for Waverly, so they've moved up a little bit in my rankings. Now in my 7, I have Fairland. They were, I think, my 5th ranked team, so I dropped them down a couple spots to 7. I don't want to say Ironton beating them was expected, because I think any team that Ironton played in our coverage area, it's pretty expected Ironton's going to win. But just the magnitude of the loss, I mean, it was 62-14.
Yeah, 62-14.
So just, a tough loss, a tough team to play in Ironton. Fairland's still 2-1. They had a big win over West, who actually have 1 spot below them now, just simply based on the head-to-head, although that came down to a last second. I think it was a 15-yard touchdown run from Peyton Jackson. But still 2-1. They still have the rest of their league play to look forward to. Gallia and OVC member a couple spots ahead of them. So, we'll see how that goes when they meet up a little later in the season. I think that's week 6. And then I already mentioned West in my 8 spot since dropping that week 1 matchup. 2 straight wins for West. They have a match against Waverly coming up. I think that might also be week 6. It's week 5 or 6, maybe 7. It's not later in the season. It's coming up relatively soon. And then they'll still have to play Wheelersburg a little bit later on. In my 9, I have Untitled. They were a little bit higher. I think they were in my 6th spot last week. So, it was a bit of a disappointing loss for them, especially after leading 14-0. I mean, anytime you give up 28 unanswered points and lose, it's a little bit disappointing, especially when you had a 2-score lead. So still in my top 10. They have the rest of the league play in SVC to look forward to. So they're still in my top 10. And then in my 10, I'm leaving Notre Dame safe and sound in my 10 spot. A big game coming up this week against another 3-0 team coming out of the TBC in Eastern Reedsville. The point differential is what stands out to me from Notre Dame. I mean, 152-35. That's pretty impressive no matter who you're playing. But yeah, those are my top 10 teams with Notre Dame rounding it out.
Okay, all right, very interesting power rankings to say the least. But that's the beauty of power rankings is that everyone has their different criteria about how they rank teams. Right. So whether it's the smallest of margins, whether it's the biggest of margins. One thing we do agree on is that Ironton is number 1, and until someone beats them, even if it is Cabell Midland, they're probably still not going to drop out to that. A great power team, in West Virginia. Even if they were to take that, Ironton would still be my number 1 team. My number 2 team is Logan Elm. They, I put them number 2 after their week 1 win against St. Trace. As I said earlier, this team is just filled with firepower. They've got it, on the ground, through the air. They play great defense. They're on a mission this year. They have the experience. One thing that helps them to me from my vantage point is that they are Division 4. If they were Division 3, I think they'd be in a lot more trouble come playoff time. But because they're in Division 4, you would end up playing, you'd end up playing, a Vinton County. You would see a Waverly. You would see a Unioto.
Right.
Worst case scenario for Logan M would be the same thing that happened to Unioto last year, is that they're a high seed, and then you get Clinton Massey, and you got,
Right.
and, you're throwing
A
to
down
the wolves.
Clinton Massey team that is 5-5, but
Exactly.
still, to
Exactly.
the same prominence. They've had Coach McSorley for how long?
For years
and they were the
years.
defending state champs. Last year they were the defending state champs.
Yeah.
Obviously not this year, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Logan Elm, they're my 2 spot. My 3 spot, I got Jackson, earning that big win over Wheelersburg. So I believe I moved them down to my 5 spot after their loss against Ironton. They jump up to 3 this week. Just a huge bounce back victory. The young Ironman team, they really grew a lot. It's a great win to build off of. Built a lot of confidence for that team moving forward, and I'm pretty confident saying that they're going to run the table the rest of the way. They'll finish their season 9-1, and win the FAC. My 4 team. See, this is where it kind of gets a little tougher. It gets a little tougher because I had Unioto at 3, they lost. I had Wheelersburg at 5, they lost. I had Fairland at 4, they took a huge loss. So now I'm kind of like mixing and matching a little bit. But I'm probably gonna put Wheelersburg as my 4.
Yeah.
Even though they lost, I feel like I kind of have to move them up, because even though, yes, you're 1 and 2, the bottom line is you're still better than a lot of teams in the area.
Losing to Ironton and Jackson is like
exactly.
are you really going to penalize
exactly
somebody? And they were both really close. They were both one-score losses.
Like you lose to 2 outstanding programs by a total of 11 points. I mean, I can't really fault you that much. And I mean, it's kind of the same thing for Wheelersburg year in and year out. They'll get off to either like a 1-2, 2-1, 3-0 start. Sometimes they start slow, but it's always around like week 5, week 6. They find their identity as a team. They figure out who they are. They figure out what works for them, and they just stick to the script. And I mean, 2 years ago, sticking to the script, that's how they beat Ironton in the playoff in week 13. It's because they didn't have to change anything. They didn't change anything. They stuck to who they were. They stuck to their guns. And sticking to their guns is what has proven that it works for them. I mean, they're in the playoffs. They're making deep playoff runs year after year after year. I mean, wasn't it just last year? I believe last year or 2 years ago they were in a regional final. The same year they beat Ironton, they were in a regional final and should have gone to state, but made some mistakes in the second half. Lost to Harvest Prep. But I mean, year in and year out, they just know who they are. They figure out how to get it done, and I mean, I think it's the exact same thing for them. So I think I'm going to move Wheelersburg to my 4.
It starts getting a little
exactly. It gets really foggy. It gets really foggy because yes, your record. The old saying is that you are what your record says you are. But if you're losing to really good teams,
right,
then I mean, does it say something about your record? Does it say something about the team you played?
Right, because when you start getting to the 5, 6, you're pretty much only dealing with like 1-loss teams, and now you're like, okay, we have to evaluate the quality of the loss.
Exactly.
And like, who did they lose to? Who did they beat? What are the records of the teams they've beaten?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like it gets a little dirty.
So at my 5 spot, I'm going to put Gallia. I'm going to put Gallia at my 5 spot. They're 3-0 in the season. I think the most impressive thing about them is that in 3 games they've given up 12 points. They've given up 12
that's pretty wild.
points all year, and that was in this game. And it was this Friday against Point Pleasant. They made the trip across the river to go down to West Virginia to play Point Pleasant. They gave up 12 points. Oh, but they scored 42 on the other end. So it's like, okay, I mean, they've won 30-0, 39-0, and 42-12.
I think their point spread is wider than Notre Dame's.
Like it is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm gonna put Gallia at my 5 spot. I'm gonna move Fairland down to my 6 spot. I mean, yes, they took a huge loss. A big gut punch in their loss to Ironton, but the fact still remains they are still a really good team. I mean, they have their own identity, issues to figure out, much like a lot of other teams do. So a lot of teams, through the first 3 or 4 weeks, you're figuring out what works. You're figuring out what type of team you are, what type of team you want to be. Yeah, these are what I call this is the gray area. The first 4 weeks is the gray area, because you're working things out. You're figuring out who works in what spots, who gets the ball at this point, who works here, who has the hot hand, things of that nature. So you're figuring all those things out. So, I mean, Fairland, they're going through the same thing, but the fact is they're 2-1. So I'm going to put them at my 6 spot. I still have West at my 7 spot. Yeah. I would put them above Fairland, but the fact remains, as you said, Fairland owns the head-to-head victory. So, I'm sorry, it is what it is. Right. West, they're still playing incredible football. Going through their own changes as well. Figuring out what works for them. Not taking the ball through the air as much this year. Working in Cole Tipton under center. But I mean, still have Tipton, still got Mason Parker, still have Jeffrey Bishop as well. Right. So I mean, you still have guys you can get the ball to in space, and they can make things happen. I know their defense got really tested in the run game this week with a high scoring game against Hillsborough. Hillsborough really pushed them. I think it was like a 48-36 final.
No, Hillsborough is like thoroughly impressed me this year.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think they're 1-2, but like it's a pretty impressive 1-2. You lose to like Western Brown, who like maybe isn't like the same caliber that they have it, but like it's still Western Brown.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like you lose, I think it was Drew Novak. Who like pretty much shattered
you lose like the second or third most prolific quarterback from a stats perspective in Ohio high school history.
Right.
I mean, yeah, you're gonna you're gonna go through your own challenges as well. Right. But West is at my 7. I got Piketon at my 8 spot. The Red Streaks, they're 3-0, flying high. I'll have to go back and look. I believe this is their. Well, no, this will be their first 3-0 start in 2 or 3 seasons.
Since Gullion was
there. Yeah, since Levi Gullion's senior year when they won the gold ball. This team right now, I mean, there is no identity crisis. They know who they are. Right. They run the ball with Buddy Wilson. And then Luke Gullion takes to the airs. I mean you have Mason Thacker on the outside, you have Wade Fowler on the outside. I mean you have guys who you can get the ball down the field to. You have guys who work in the screen game as well, who are incredibly shifty. Make 2 guys miss, you're going up the sideline. 65 yards later, you're in the end zone. So I mean this team has a really, really good chance to win the SVC. I know. When I was on the Ride the Wave podcast back in June, I said that Piketon was my sleeper pick to win the SVC. I'm still sticking with that for now.
Especially, I would feel more strongly about that now than I would have back in June.
I knew the SVC was going to be wide open this year. I know that some teams they have the quarterback back, but the experience around them is much different. I mean that's the case for Unioto, for Zane Trace. Piketon in a way is the exact same way, but Piketon is mainly of juniors and seniors. I mean juniors and sophomores. Correction. I think they have like 8 seniors on their team. So I mean this year and next year would be their time to reign supreme over the SVC.
I will say before you get into your your 8 spot, like Piketon, I think Piketon has maybe Huntington this week at Huntington.
I think so.
Week 5, they have Zane Trace at home. I think and I think we are going to live stream that, spoiler, like 2 weeks in advance. But that's going to be a big test for them. It'll probably be the first big test for them.
I'd say so.
Because you're going to get Unioto later, you're going to get Paint Valley later, but you're going to get Zane Trace before all of them at home. Yeah, we'll see what happens there.
Yep, and Dewey might be donning a costume after that.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh, I did not forget. But yeah, we'll dive into that.
Well, next week we'll.
That's true.
Next week we'll talk about it a little bit.
We can dive into that next week. But at my 9 spot, this is where it gets hard. This is where it really gets hard because I think in my 9 spot, who did I have in 10 last week? I can't quite remember.
You had Paint Valley.
I had Paint Valley. So
and they think
they won.
They took down McClain.
They beat McClain. I know they did. I think I'd move Paint Valley up to 9. I mean it was an impressive victory.
Mm-hmm.
It got them back in the win column. It got momentum back on their side as they enter SVC play as well. Preston Faber, I mean, he's starting to gain his confidence. I believe he had a passing touchdown. I think he had 2 rushing touchdowns as well. So the Bearcat defense came through, got some big stops as well. I believe they led. No, it was after halftime they led because it was 7-7 at halftime.
I knew it was close at halftime.
Yeah, 7-7 at halftime, and then it ended up being 21-7, 21-15, and then 29-15, and ended up being the final score. So, the Bearcats would go to number 9, and at my 10 spot, this is where it gets really dicey. Because Colgrove is 3-0. I believe Chesapeake is 3-0 as well. Mm-hmm. But Waverly just beat a really good Unioto team. I don't even know if I mentioned Unioto. I don't even know if I did. I really don't think I did. I think I completely forgot about them. So now I got to rework. I got to rework a little bit. So let's see. I had Gallia at my 5. So Unioto would go down to my 6. Yeah. Unioto would go to my 6. Then it would be.
You'd still have Unioto over Waverly.
I have
Fairland over West. I know
I do, but also at the same point, I didn't have Waverly in my power rankings last week. I know they beat Zane Trace, but I wanted to see more from them, and now I have seen more. Both teams are 2-1. Oh man. But the thing is, I had Unioto at 3. I can't move them down 7 spots. I mean, I guess I could.
You can if you want to.
I mean, yeah, I guess I could. It is my power.
I had them at my 9.
Oh my lord, man. Yeah, I'd probably move Unioto down to my 6. Fairland would be 7. Yeah, Fairland would be 7.
West 8.
West 8. Python. Man,
would you have
I got a lot of thinking.
Maybe Waverly 8, West 9.
I know. I got a lot of thinking to do on this one.
Should be an interesting power rankings.
I couldn't even give you a 10 spot because I completely forgot about Unioto. I'm not taking Unioto out of my power rankings because of one loss. I can't do that.
I moved them from I think either 5 or 6 down to 9. So
yeah.
I had Waverly at I think 9 going into the week. So
yeah. So I'd probably have it Ironton, Logan Elm, Jackson, Wheelersburg, Gallia, Unioto, Fairland, West, Python. I'd probably have to move Paint Valley out. I'd probably take Paint Valley and I'd probably put either Waverly, Colgrove, or Chesapeake in. It'd be one of those 3 teams. I'm not sure which one.
I'm interested to see what you pick.
I am too.
This Thursday.
This ought to be good. Yeah. Be on the lookout for my power rankings. SOSAOhio.com. Those should come out either on Thursday or Friday morning.
Early Friday.
Yeah. Be on the lookout for those. It's gonna be something.
So for my power rankings, after week 3, we had a big shakeup. Ironton will stay at the top unless something crazy happens. They're going to stay at the top. Probably throughout the year. Next, number 2, Logan Elm. The Braves continue to impress week after week. 3-0. Pretty dominating wins in all 3 matchups. So I think it's not a secret now that the Braves are very good. Number 3, Jackson with a big win over Wheelersburg in week 3. Brock just talked about it a little bit. It's a very good win for Jackson. They continue to be one of the top programs in Southeast Ohio. Number 4, I have Gallia Academy. The Blue Devils continue to soar to victories. It's just they beat Point Pleasant 42-12. It was their first points they gave up on the year after a 39-0 win and a 30-0 win. Before that, having that nice shutout streak ended but they're still outscoring opponents 111-12 so far through 3 weeks of action. We'll see them this week against Chesapeake. Chesapeake 3-0 for the first time in a long time, so that's going to be an interesting matchup. They should take care of it, but week 6 is when it gets a little more rocky as Fairland comes into town, or they go to Fairland. So that'll be an interesting one down the road. Wheelersburg is number 5 for me, 1-2, but that's, to me, it's just their schedule's very tough. They had a hard-fought victory in week 2 over McNicholas, but running into Ironton in week 1, a tight game, and then Jackson, maybe not as tight as we thought it would be. In week 3, Wheelersburg has a really good chance to finish at 8-2, win the SOC2, and get a good playoff seeding. And I think they've got a really good chance to do so. West at number 6, Waverly jumps up to number 7 for me. I was really impressed with them, watching them on the stream. They didn't do a lot of wild stuff. It wasn't anything like out of the ordinary. A lot of Jace Hurd. Mason Kelly, after some struggles early in that game against Unioto, really settled down and started just finding men underneath. They've got some good receivers. I like their line play. I think that Waverly team is just going to keep getting better and better as the season goes on. Number 8, I have Fairland. That game is more about Ironton than it was Fairland, but it was just such a big, 48 points is such a big difference, is why I had to drop them down a little bit. Number 9, new to my rankings, are the Red Streaks of Piketon. I know Brock has been high on Piketon all year. They've played a not very strong schedule so far, but they have dominated that schedule so far. So really impressive run so far for Coach Gullion and the Red Streaks. I think it's going to continue for a little bit longer until they got Zane Trace coming up here in a couple weeks. But Piketon out to a really good start, maybe a year ahead of time. They do have some good seniors, but it's a lot of underclassmen contributing in big ways for the Red Streaks. And then number 10, I've got the team that we will be covering on the stream this week, Notre Dame, the Titans, just rolling through their opponents so far through 3 weeks. Got a big one with Reedsville Eastern coming up in week 4. And, we'll get to kind of see in person how good the Titans are. And, I'm just really impressed with them so far. Dropping out for me, Unioto was one of them. I'm not too far down on the Shermans so far. It was a game that, a couple things could maybe have gone their way that did not. Waverly took advantage of that. And before Unioto was able to kind of wake up, Waverly was already up 2 scores. And, I think Unioto's got a really good chance to still win the SVC along with St. Trace and Paint Valley and Piketon. So that should be a really fun race in the Scioto Valley Conference. So once again, Ironton 1, Logan 2, Jackson 3, Guy Academy 4, Wheelersburg 5, West 6, Waverly 7, Fairland 8, Piketon 9, and Notre Dame 10. Look for Washington Courthouse 2. They got blasted by London in week 1, but they have really been impressive the last 2 weeks. Rocky Jones, an outstanding all-purpose back for them. And, the Coffins are really good for them as well. So I think it's an interesting team to look for. And, so that's all I've got. So signing off from Houston, Texas. Y'all have a good rest of the show, and we will see you all next week.
All right. Well, I think your attempted power rankings itself just kind of highlights, once you get past maybe the top 3 or 4 teams, how close everybody else is.
That speaks to just how close a lot of these teams are, and the talent level that we have throughout the area. Doing these power rankings week in, week out, it gets harder and harder. It's no different than doing all area teams.
Right.
It gets harder and harder every year because the margins are so small. You're splitting hairs among teams who probably deserve to be in the top 10, but it always comes down to just those smallest of margins. So I definitely have my work cut out for me this week.
All right, Brock. Well, thank you for coming on this week. Maybe we'll see you next week, and we'll see the wager for potentially the Piketon and Zane Trace game coming up in week 5.
We'll give you guys, the full details about this little wager that we have going on next week.
But thank you to McDonald's for making this week's episode possible with locations in Chillicothe, Greenfield, Circleville, and right here in Waverly. McDonald's, the official sponsor of SOSA Overtime. Brock, unless you have anything extra you want to add, any players or teams coming up this week?
All I can say is that it's going to be a fun week of sports. No matter what sport you go to, whether it's volleyball, soccer, football, if you go to a golf meet, if you check out a cross country meet, it's going to be a fun week across the social landscape. I'm looking forward to it. It's been a fun Labor Day weekend. I'll say that. I have lived up this Labor Day weekend, but now it's time to get back to the sidelines.
You and Derek both, as we saw. It's one of my favorite videos I've ever seen. But that'll do it for this week right here on SOSA Overtime, presented by McDonald's.